School teacher Sarah thought the HOA president was just another bully trying to steal her grandmother's cabin with impossible demands and crushing fines. Until she discovered the shocking truth buried in 80-year-old property records. She didn't just own a cabin, she owned the entire lake and every neighbor's docked up. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more HOA stories. Sarah Thompson never expected trouble when she inherited her grandmother's old lake cabin. The rustic wooden house sat on Crystal Lake in the mountains, surrounded by newer fancy homes with perfect lawns and expensive cars. Sarah loved the simple life, fishing in the morning, reading on the porch and watching sunsets over the water. But peace doesn't last when greedy people smell money. 3 weeks after moving in permanently, Sarah was splitting firewood when a black Mercedes pulled into her gravel driveway. Out stepped a woman in a white pantsuit and designer sunglasses, followed by 2 men in expensive suits. "Are you the new resident?" the woman asked, looking at Sarah's flannel shirt and work boots with disgust. "I'm Sarah Thompson. This is my grandmother's cabin." "Well, mine now." "I'm Patricia Blackwood, president of the Crystal Lake Homeowners Association. These are my attorneys, Mr. Davidson and Mr. Cruz." She handed Sarah a thick manila envelope. "We need to discuss your property situation." Sarah wiped her hands on her jeans before taking the envelope. "What situation?" "Your cabin is in violation of multiple HOA covenants. The structure is outdated, the landscaping is substandard, and frankly, it's bringing down property values for the entire lake community." Sarah looked around at her grandmother's flower garden, the old oak trees and the hand-built stone walkway. "My grandmother lived here for 40 years. Never had any problems." "Your grandmother was tolerated because she was elderly. But now we have new standards. The HOA has voted to require all properties meet modern building codes and aesthetic guidelines." Patricia pulled out her phone and showed Sarah photos of the other lakefront homes, massive glass and steel structures that looked like corporate offices. "This is what Crystal Lake represents now. Excellence. Sophistication. Your little shack doesn't fit." Sarah felt her temper rising. Her grandmother had built this cabin with her own hands after World War II. It wasn't just a house, it was family history. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Tear it down and build something appropriate. We have approved architectural plans that would be perfect for your lot. The cost would only be around $2 million. Sarah nearly choked. $2 million? I'm a school teacher. I make $30,000 a year. Patricia smiled coldly. "Then perhaps you should sell to someone who can afford to live here properly. I have several clients who would pay handsomely for lakefront property." "I'm not selling." "Then you'll be receiving daily fines until your property complies. $500 per day starting tomorrow." Sarah stared at the legal documents in the envelope. Pages and pages of violations, fines and legal threats. Her hands shook with anger. "This is insane. You can't just force me out of my own home." "Watch us," Patricia said, climbing back into her Mercedes. "You have 30 days to begin demolition or face additional legal action." The impossible demands. The next morning, Sarah found a bright orange sign in her yard, "Property in violation, daily fines in effect." Her neighbors walked by without making eye contact. Some actually crossed the street to avoid her. Sarah called the phone number on the HOA paperwork. "Crystal Lake Community Management, this is Brenda." "Hi, this is Sarah Thompson. I received violation notices for my property at 247 Lakeshore Drive. I'd like to understand exactly what's required." "Hold please." After 10 minutes of elevator music, Brenda came back. "Mrs. Thompson, I have your file. You're required to demolish the existing structure and build according to HOA architectural standards. The minimum square footage is 4,000, minimum cost is 1.8 million, and you must use approved contractors only." "What if I just want to fix up what I have?" "That's not an option. The existing structure doesn't meet foundation requirements, setback requirements, or aesthetic standards. It has to go." Sarah hung up, feeling sick. She walked down to the lake and sat on her grandmother's old wooden dock, watching the water lap against the posts. An elderly man was fishing from the next dock over. He waved and walked over. "You must be Sarah. I'm Frank Miller. Lived here since 1995. I'm sorry about what they're doing to you. You know about the HOA situation?" Frank nodded sadly. "They did the same thing to the Johnsons last year. Nice old couple, lived here 20 years. HOA forced them out, said their house was too small. A developer bought the lot and put up one of those glass monsters. Is there any way to fight it?" "Hard to say. The HOA seems to have unlimited money for lawyers. Most folks just give up and sell. Sarah looked at the other dock stretching into the lake. Something bothered her. Frank, who owns the lake bottom? I mean, where we're sitting right now. Good question. I always assumed it was public property or something. Why? Sarah stood up suddenly. I need to make some phone calls. The discovery. That afternoon, Sarah drove to the county courthouse. If the HOA wanted to play legal games, she'd learn the rules. I need to see the property records for Crystal Lake, she told the clerk. The whole lake. That's a lot of parcels. What specifically are you looking for? I want to understand who owns what. My property is 247 Lakeshore Drive. The clerk pulled up the records on her computer. Here's your parcel. Deed shows it was transferred to you 6 months ago from Emma Thompson. That's my grandmother. What does the legal description say? The clerk read from the screen. Let's see. Lot begins at the northeast corner of Section 12, extends 200 feet along Lakeshore Drive, then 400 feet perpendicular to the lake, including all riparian rights and lake bottom to the center point of Crystal Lake. Sarah's heart stopped. What does that mean exactly? Riparian rights means you own the water access. And this says you own the lake bottom from your shoreline to the center of the lake. The center? Like half the lake. The clerk looked more carefully. Actually, let me check something else. She typed rapidly. This is interesting. Your grandmother's original deed is from 1943. Back then, Crystal Lake was much smaller, just a natural pond. In 1963, the county dammed the creek to create the larger lake for flood control. So when they expanded the lake, they had to get permission from existing landowners. According to this, your grandmother Emma Thompson was the sole landowner at the time. She gave permission for the dam, but retained ownership of the expanded lake bottom. Sarah felt dizzy. Are you saying I own the entire lake? The clerk pulled up a survey map. According to these records, yes. You own the lake bottom, the water rights, and... She paused. Oh my. You also own the strip of land around the entire lake, what they call the lake access easement. That's where all the other docks are built. Sarah stared at the map. Every single dock on Crystal Lake was built on her property. How is that possible? The HOA never mentioned this. Did you read your full deed when you inherited? Sarah shook her head. My lawyer just said it was a standard property transfer. The clerk printed everything out. You might want to get a second opinion on this. If these records are accurate, you're not just a homeowner here, you're the landlord. Sarah called every lawyer in the phone book until she found one who specialized in property law. James Mitchell agreed to see her that afternoon. This is remarkable, he said, studying the documents. I've never seen anything quite like this. Your grandmother was incredibly smart. What do you mean? When the county wanted to expand the lake in 1963, they needed permission from landowners. Most people would have just signed over the rights for a small payment. But your grandmother negotiated to keep ownership while allowing public use. She essentially became the private owner of a public lake. Is it legal? Completely. And what's more, every dock, every boat slip, every water access point around this lake is technically on your property. The other homeowners are trespassing. Sarah's head was spinning. The HOA is charging me fines for not meeting their standards. Mitchell laughed. The HOA has no authority over your property. In fact, according to these easement agreements, you have the right to charge rent for every dock on the lake. Rent? Look at this clause here. Landowner retains right to reasonable compensation for use of lake access facilities. Your grandmother just never exercised that right. But you can. Sarah thought about Patricia Blackwood's sneering face, her threats and ultimatums. How much rent could I charge? Mitchell did some quick calculations. There are 47 docks on this lake. Fair market rate for lakefront dock rental is about $2,000 per month. That's $94,000 monthly, over $1 million per year. And if they don't pay? Then they're trespassing and you can have their docks removed. Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks. I think I need to call a meeting. Sarah spent the next week preparing. She had the property surveyed professionally, confirming every detail. She researched comparable dock rental rates from other lakes. Most importantly, she had Mitchell draft official notices for every property owner. Then she called Patricia Blackwood. Mrs. Blackwood? This is Sarah Thompson. I'd like to call an emergency HOA meeting. You're not a member of the HOA board, Miss Thompson. You don't get to call meetings. Actually, I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. It's about property rights around Crystal Lake. Patricia's voice got icy. If this is about your violation fines, they're not negotiable. You're now up to $15,000 in penalties. It's not about my fines. It's about your dock. My dock? What about my dock? Well, it turns out it's built on my property, along with every other dock on the lake. There was a long silence. That's impossible. I have the surveys and legal documents to prove it. Meeting tomorrow night, 7 p.m. at the community center. Everyone should come. The community center was packed. All 47 lakefront property owners were there, along with Patricia's team of lawyers. Sarah sat calmly in the front row with Mitchell beside her. Patricia called the meeting to order. Before we begin regular business, Miss Thompson has requested to make some sort of presentation about property boundaries. I'm sure we can clear up any confusion quickly. Sarah stood up. Thank you. I know everyone here has been concerned about my property and whether it meets community standards. I've done some research and I think you'll find the results interesting. She nodded to Mitchell, who began distributing copies of the survey maps. What you're looking at is the official county survey of Crystal Lake, completed last month. As you can see, the red line shows the boundary of my property. Murmurs started as people studied the maps. This must be wrong, said one man. My dock isn't on your property. Actually, it is, Sarah replied calmly. The red line shows that I own not just my cabin lot, but the entire lake bottom and a 50-foot easement around the entire lake perimeter. Patricia stood up. This is ridiculous. These maps must be fraudulent. Mitchell handed her a thick folder. These are certified copies of all relevant deeds, surveys, and legal documents dating back to 1943. Everything has been verified by the county recorder's office. The bottom line, Sarah continued, is that every dock, boat slip, and water access point on Crystal Lake is built on my property. The room erupted. People were shouting, demanding explanations, waving the survey maps. Frank Miller, Sarah's neighbor, raised his hand. Sarah, what does this mean for those of us who've been here for decades? Good question. My grandmother allowed everyone to use the lake freely for over 50 years. But legally, you've all been using my property without permission. Patricia's face had gone white. Even if this is true, which I doubt, there are adverse possession laws. We've been using these areas for decades. Mitchell stood up. Adverse possession requires that usage be hostile to the owner's interests. Mrs. Thompson's grandmother gave explicit permission for lake access, which prevents any adverse possession claims. The recent surveys confirm that the original property boundaries remain intact. Sarah looked around the room at her neighbors. Some looked angry, others worried, a few seemed amused by the situation. I want to be fair to everyone, Sarah said. But I also want to be treated fairly. Mrs. Blackwood has been charging me $500 per day in fines for property violations. She's threatened to force me out of my home. She's claimed my family's cabin doesn't belong in this community. So what do you want? Patricia asked through gritted teeth. Sarah smiled. I want the fine stopped immediately. I want a written apology from the HOA. And I want fair rent for the use of my property. How much rent? Someone called out. Standard rate for lakefront dock rental is $2,000 per month per dock. The room went silent. Sarah could hear the air conditioning humming. That's $94,000 per month total, she continued. Over $1 million per year. Several people stood up to leave, but Mitchell's voice stopped them. Before anyone goes, you should know that unpaid rent would be considered trespassing. Mrs. Thompson would have the legal right to remove any structures built on her property. You can't do this. Patricia shouted. This is extortion. No, Sarah replied calmly. This is property law. The same property law you tried to use to steal my home. After the initial shock wore off, cooler heads prevailed. The community realized they needed to work with Sarah, not fight her. Frank Miller approached her after the meeting. Sarah, you've got us over a barrel here. But most of us are just regular folks who saved up to buy our dream homes. We can't afford $2,000 a month in dock fees. Sarah had been thinking about this. I know, Frank. I don't want to hurt good people. But I also can't let the HOA bully me out of my home. Over the next week, Sarah met with small groups of neighbors. Most were apologetic about the HOA's behavior and genuinely wanted to find a solution. The holdout was Patricia Blackwood. I'm not paying you 1 cent, Patricia declared when Sarah called her. I'll fight this in court for years if I have to. That's your choice, Sarah replied. But while you're fighting, you'll need to remove your dock from my property. You can't make me. Actually, I can. Trespassing is a criminal offense. The next morning, Sarah had her lawyer serve Patricia with a formal eviction notice. Patricia had 30 days to remove her dock or face legal action. Most of the other homeowners were more reasonable. They formed a committee to negotiate with Sarah. "We understand your position," said committee leader Tom Harrison. "The HOA treated you terribly. But we hope we can work something out that's fair for everyone." Sarah had prepared a proposal. "Here's what I'm thinking. I'll charge a reasonable rate for dock rentals, say $200 per month instead of $2,000. That covers my property taxes and maintenance of the lake area." "That seems fair," Tom agreed. "In exchange, I want the HOA completely reformed. No more harassment, no more forcing people out with ridiculous fines. Everyone gets to live how they want on their own property." "What about Patricia?" Sarah's expression hardened. "Mrs. Blackwood tried to steal my home. She can pay full market rate or get out." The committee agreed to Sarah's terms. Within 2 weeks, 46 of the 47 property owners had signed rental agreements and paid their first month's fees. Patricia Blackwood held out. On day 29 of Patricia's eviction notice, she finally called Sarah. "I want to discuss a settlement." "The time for discussion was 3 weeks ago," Sarah replied. "You have 24 hours to remove your dock." "This is insane. I've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in my property. And you tried to force me to spend $2 million rebuilding my cabin. Funny how that works." "Fine. I'll pay your ridiculous rent." Sarah paused. "The rental rate for you is $2,000 per month, plus $15,000 in back fees to match what you charged me in fines. That's highway robbery. That's consequences. You should have thought about this before you tried to bully me." Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "What if I drop all the HOA violations against you? Clean slate." "Not enough. I want a written apology published in the local newspaper. I want you to resign as HOA president. And I want full market rate for your dock rental." "I won't do it." "Then remove your dock by tomorrow or I'll have it removed for you." The next morning, Sarah woke to the sound of construction equipment. Patricia was having her expensive dock torn out by a crew of workers. Frank Miller knocked on Sarah's door around lunchtime. "Thought you'd like to see this," he said, handing her the local newspaper. On the front page was an article titled, "HOA President Resigns After Property Dispute." Below it was a box statement. "I, Patricia Blackwood, formally apologize to Sarah Thompson for the harassment and illegal fines imposed by the Crystal Lake HOA. Ms. Thompson's property rights were violated, and the HOA's actions were inappropriate and without legal basis. I am resigning my position as HOA president effective immediately." Sarah couldn't stop smiling. Over the following months, the lake community transformed. The new HOA board, led by Frank Miller, focused on actual community needs like road maintenance and snow removal instead of harassing homeowners. Sarah used her rental income to restore her grandmother's cabin beautifully, keeping its rustic charm while making it comfortable and efficient. She also improved the lake area, adding walking trails and better boat launches that everyone could enjoy. Several neighbors apologized personally for not standing up to Patricia's bullying. Many admitted they'd been afraid of becoming targets themselves. "The thing is," Frank told Sarah one evening as they fished from her dock, "most of us moved here to get away from that kind of corporate nonsense. We just forgot how to stand up for ourselves." Word of Sarah's victory spread beyond Crystal Lake. She started getting calls from other homeowners facing similar HOA harassment. "The key," she would tell them, "is knowing your rights. Most HOAs count on people being too scared or too poor to fight back. But property law is property law." Sarah helped establish a legal defense fund for homeowners fighting abusive HOAs. Her story inspired legislation in the state capitol requiring HOAs to provide clear justification for fines and giving homeowners stronger appeal processes. The local newspaper did a follow-up story 6 months later. Property values around Crystal Lake had actually increased after Patricia's reign of terror ended. The community had a reputation now for being friendly and welcoming instead of hostile and elitist. A year after inheriting her grandmother's cabin, Sarah was living her dream life. She taught at the local elementary school during the day and spent evenings on the lake. Her rental income from the docks more than covered her expenses, giving her financial security she'd never had before. The community had become genuinely friendly. Summer barbecues, winter ice fishing contests, and holiday parties brought everyone together. Children played safely around the lake while parents watched from their docks. Patricia Blackwood had moved away after selling her house at a loss. The new owners were a young couple with twins who loved the community atmosphere. One evening, Sarah was reading on her porch when Frank stopped by. "Got something for you," he said, handing her an envelope. Inside was a photo of the entire lake community at the recent 4th of July celebration. On the back, dozens of neighbors had signed messages. "Thank you for saving our community. You're the best neighbor ever. Welcome home, Sarah." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. Her grandmother would have loved this. That night, Sarah sat on her grandmother's old dock, watching the stars reflect on the calm water. The lake was peaceful, the community was thriving, and justice had been served. Her phone buzzed with a text from her lawyer. "Just heard Patricia Blackwood was arrested for HOA fraud at her new community in Florida. Seems she tried the same tricks there. Thought you'd like to know karma is working." Sarah laughed out loud, the sound carrying across the water. She owned an entire lake, had defeated a corrupt HOA, and built a real community with her neighbors. Most importantly, she'd honored her grandmother's memory by protecting the home Emma Thompson had built with her own hands. The HOA had tried to evict Sarah from her lake cabin, thinking she was just a poor teacher they could push around. They never imagined she owned the whole lake. Final score: HOA $0, Sarah $1 million plus per year in rental income plus a saved community. Sometimes the little guy wins big.